Most people treat basil like a houseplant. They water it, give it some sunshine, pluck a leaf or two for a caprese salad, and then one morning the whole thing has shot up into a tall, woody stalk covered in tiny white flowers. Just like that, the flavor is gone. The leaves turn bitter, the plant quits producing, and another summer of homegrown basil is over before it really got started. I made that exact mistake my first 3 seasons of gardening, close to 15 years ago now, and it was honestly a little embarrassing how long it took me to figure out what was going on. But once I understood the science behind how basil decides when to stop growing leaves, everything changed. In this video, I am going to walk you through the one pruning technique that keeps basil producing fresh, flavorful harvests from your last frost all the way into fall. I will explain not just what to cut and where, but why each cut triggers the response we want. And stick around for the bonus tip at the end, because I'm going to show you how to turn every pruning session into free plants. That trick alone has saved me a small fortune. Basil is the most popular urban American home gardens, and for good reason. It grows fast, smells incredible, and nothing beats it fresh off the plant. But the gap between people who get a handful of leaves and people who harvest armloads all summer comes down to one thing: understanding how this plant makes its growth decisions. The science is surprisingly straightforward, and once you see it, you'll never look at a basil plant the same way. Let me put on my teacher hat for a minute, because this is the part that makes everything else click. Basil is governed by a hormone called auxin that concentrates at the tip of the main stem. Auxin sends a chemical signal downward, telling the side branches to stay dormant. Biologists call this apical dominance. The plant puts all its energy into growing straight up because its only goal is to flower, set seed, and reproduce. It does not care about giving you pesto. When you remove that top growth point, you remove the auxin source. Those dormant nodes further down the stem suddenly wake up, and each one pushes out 2 new branches. One stem becomes 2. 2 becomes 4. 4 becomes 8. That exponential branching is the entire secret to a massive bushy basil plant that keeps producing all season long. The first thing to get right is your starting material. For sheer leaf volume, I always recommend large leaf varieties like Genovese or Italian large leaf. They produce broad, tender leaves, perfect for cooking and respond beautifully to pruning. Compact types like Spicy Globe are lovely in pots, but they are naturally bushy, and you will not see the same dramatic results from this technique. Whatever variety you choose, do not start pruning too early. Wait until the plant has at least 3 sets of true leaves and stands roughly 6 to 8 inches tall. If you are growing outdoors, make sure your soil temperature is at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit before transplanting. Basil is extremely cold sensitive, and below 50 degrees, the leaves darken and the plant stalls completely. I check with a cheap soil thermometer every spring, about $5 or $6 at any garden centre, and it has kept me from jumping the gun more times than I can count. Once your plant is tall enough, the next step is learning to read the nodes, and this is easier than it sounds. Follow the main stem upward. At every point where a pair of large leaves connects to the stem, you will notice 2 tiny baby leaves just starting to emerge from the joint. Those are the nodes, your future branches. I always describe them as looking like a tiny person raising both hands toward the sky. Every single one is a dormant branch point waiting for the auxin signal to drop. When I first started out, I did not even know these existed. I was randomly snipping leaves wherever it looked convenient and could not figure out why my plant kept getting leggy and thin instead of bushy. The moment I learned to identify nodes and cut just above them, my whole approach changed, and my harvest tripled practically overnight. This is where it gets interesting. Take a clean pair of scissors or just pinch with your thumbnail and forefinger and cut the main stem about 1/4 inch above a node. That is the entire technique. But the precision matters. Cut too close and you risk damaging those tiny emerging leaves, killing the branch point. Cut too far above and you leave a bare stub with no leaves to photosynthesize, and it just rots. 1/4 inch is the sweet spot. It gives the plant enough stem to heal cleanly while keeping the node intact. After you make that cut, look at what you've done. Those 2 little leaf sets at the node will start growing outward in opposite directions within just a few days, forming a V shape. Where you had 1 stem going up, you now have 2 going out. Each of those new stems will develop its own nodes that you can cut again down the road. If you are finding this helpful so far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every week breaking down the science behind growing better food at home. It is completely free, and it means you will not miss the next one. All right, let us keep going. Once you have made that first cut and the 2 new branches are growing, establish a regular rhythm. I prune my basil every 7 to 10 days during the growing season, and I treat every pruning session as a harvest. Think about the math. After the first cut, you have 2 stems. A week later, you cut both, and you have 4. Another week, 4 becomes 8. By midsummer, a single plant pruned consistently can have 30 or more active growing tips, all producing leaves at once. That is how people end up with those enormous dome-shaped basil plants that look like small green shrubs. I have had neighbours walk past my raised beds in July and ask what variety I am growing, and the answer is just regular Genovese that has been pruned consistently. One thing I have learned the hard way is to always prune in the morning. The essential oils that give basil its flavour peak in the morning before the heat causes them to volatilize. The plant also recovers faster from cutting stress when it has a full day of sunlight ahead to heal the wound. Here is the thing most people miss. You do not need separate harvesting and pruning sessions. Every time you harvest basil for the kitchen, you should be pruning at the same time. Cut from the top down, right above a node, and you are simultaneously collecting tonight's ingredients and encouraging the plant to branch out even further. The one rule is never take more than a third of the plant in a single session. I pushed past that limit once in my 4th year, making a huge batch of pesto for a family gathering, and the plant went into shock for nearly 2 weeks before it started growing again. After you finish, step back and look at the plant from above. It should still appear full and rounded like a green dome. If you can see bare stems or gaps, you took too much. Over time, you develop a feel for it, but that 1/3 guideline is a reliable starting point that has never steered me wrong. Let me walk you through the most common problems because I have dealt with every one of these personally. If you spot flower buds forming at the stem tips, pinch them off immediately. Do not wait, do not admire them, just remove them. Once basil starts flowering, the plant shifts its entire energy budget from leaves to seeds, and the flavor turns bitter almost overnight. Prune on schedule every 7 to 10 days, and you will catch them before they open. If your stems are growing tall and thin with big gaps between the leaf sets, the plant needs more light. Basil requires a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight, and 8 is better. If the base of the stem turns dark brown or black, that is typically a fungal issue from excess moisture. Water the soil, not the foliage, and make sure there is decent airflow around the plant. Yellowing leaves usually mean the plant is hungry. Basil is a surprisingly heavy feeder, and I give mine a half-strength liquid fertilizer every 2 to 3 weeks during the season. Finally, if the plant wilts, even though the soil is moist, it is probably root-bound or dealing with heat stress. Basil struggles when temperatures stay above 90 degrees, and a little afternoon shade. Cloth works wonders in zones 7 through 9. All right, this is the bonus tip I promised, and it might be worth the whole video by itself. Every stem you cut during pruning is a potential new plant. I stumbled onto this about 5 years into my gardening journey, and the science is actually pretty simple. Basil roots incredibly easily in water. Take your cuttings, strip the leaves off the bottom 2 inches and drop them in a glass of clean water on a sunny windowsill. Change the water every 2 days. Within 5 to 7 days, you will see white roots pushing out from the submerged nodes. Once those roots reach about 2 inches, transplant into moist potting soil. I have turned a single $4 grocery store basil plant into a dozen thriving plants in one summer using nothing but this method and a few mason jars. It feels a little bit like cheating, but the science is sound and the results speak for themselves. That is everything I have for you on basil pruning today. Gardening is one of those things where once you understand the science behind what the plant actually wants, everything gets simpler and a whole lot more productive. If you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next one. Happy gardening, and I will see you in the next video.